everybody. I am the Comics Kid 2099, and I am joined by my partner in crime, Connor Nielsen. Connor, how are you doing today?
I am doing very well this fine day. How are you, Comics Kid?
I'm also doing well. We are talking about Shang-Chi from earlier this year, as has been the case for the last several of the new releases that we've talked about. We're coming in late because I am a cheapo and I watch it for free on Disney Plus months after it released. So that's what we're talking about. This is a spoiler podcast, but before we get into the spoilers, Connor, why don't you tell us a little bit about Shang-Chi?
So, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is the second feature film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe's fourth phase. This is directed by Destin Daniel Cretton, and it stars Simu Liu as Sean or Shang-Chi, as he was born, but he is currently Sean, who is the son of the Mandarin, or Wenwu as he is called. And right now he is living in San Francisco. He is a valet with his best friend Katie, played by Aquafina. And one day, a couple of assassins try to take something from around his neck that was given to him by his mom. And then he's realizing this is his past catching up. And he has to let his friend know that he's actually the son of Wenwu, aka the Mandarin, who is the leader of the Ten Rings crime organization. He is thousands of years old, and Sean, or as he was born, Shang-Chi, was actually trained from birth to be, or not maybe not from birth, but trained in his preteen years to be an assassin, the best there is. And in order to save the day, he must confront his father and his family's past, and also his mother's past. Even though his mother is dead, she comes from this place called Ta Lo, which is a mystical city that has crazy animals and dragons and other Pokemon-esque creatures. Um, so I guess that's kind of the basic setup. This stars, as I said, Simu Liu, Tony Leung, Aquafina, Menjir Zhang, Fala Chen, Michelle Yeoh, Ben Kingsley, and Benedict Wong shows up as Wong. So, Comics Kid, how did you feel about Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings?
First of all, I will be remiss if I didn't say this. There is this god awful B movie called Max Magician and the Legend of the Rings. It was if you're like Connor and I, a fan of Red Letter Media, it was very nearly featured on an episode of Best of the Worst, but their tape was just like awful and they couldn't watch it. I actually own a copy of that movie. I bought it for $2. I have no shame. But every time I hear when I think of this movie that we are talking about now, I just call it Shang-Chi in my mind. But when someone says the full title, instantly my mind goes to, oh yeah, Max Magician and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Yeah, that movie. So anyway, I liked this movie more than I thought I would. Anyone who has been keeping up with our podcasts on the MCU, I have, you would know, I've been more or less consistently disappointed with everything past Endgame. I liked Far From Home okay, but upon reconsideration, I don't like it as much as Homecoming. I did not like WandaVision or Falcon and Winter Soldier or Loki. I only watched one episode of What If, and I haven't watched any Hawkeye yet. And I haven't seen, I didn't like Black Widow, haven't seen the Eternals, and by the time this goes up, I think Spider-Man Homeless may be out, or maybe it's not yet out. I don't know, but it'll be a while before I watch Eternals or Spider-Man 3. So this felt like a pre-Endgame movie to me, which is I would say, coming from me, that's pretty high praise. There are some things about it I don't like, but it impressed me. I did not expect to like it as much as I did.
Well, that's cool. I'm glad to hear that. I did see this in theaters, and so watching this for this review, this was the second time I got a chance to watch it. Um, I I enjoy this movie. I want to say that. I feel like I'm going to be a little more negative in this review than I want to be, but I do enjoy this movie, and I think that what works about it is quite apparent. But the issues I have with it do kind of come more from the um, the kind of wider context of the Marvel Studios output. I've just been noticing trends with it, and I don't know. I can already see a comment that may or may not exist. That's like, oh, you got to take this entirely on its own merits. And I don't know. When a studio is putting out 9 projects a year and a few of them are very similar, I'm going to take notice of that. So I don't know.
And when it's very clear that standalone movies don't exist anymore. It's all about franchise, franchise, franchise. And this movie, yes, this movie is it stands on its own more than some of the others, but like it's setting stuff up, and like it's relying on, like, if you haven't seen Iron Man 3, or if you haven't seen it in a while, there's a significant portion of this movie that's going to be confusing to you. And so it's nearly impossible to take this on its own merits when the movie refuses to exist on its own merits.
That is an excellent point. Yeah, like Wong and the Abomination show up in this movie, and so does Trevor from Iron Man 3. Oh, this is a spoiler podcast, by the way. Just
Mhm.
but I feel like we've been doing this so late after the movie actually came out that I don't know.
Yeah.
You see the runtime of this podcast, you kind of walked into it. So where do you want to start with this, Comics Kid?
Why don't we just go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off and talk about the Iron Man 3 connection? Connor, did you like the Mandarin reveal in Iron Man 3?
The first time, no, but I also hated Iron Man 3 the first time I watched it, and the more I watch it, the more I like it. I actually really like Iron Man 3. I think that I like the Mandarin reveal that Ben Kingsley is just some actor. I'm less interested in the kind of obligatory "I'm the Mandarin" Tony that Guy Pearce says in the third act. But which one are you specifically talking about? The
That
Trevor?
that whole thing, both.
Okay.
So you were probably, I was totally on board when there were parts of Iron Man 3 I didn't like. When you go to see an Iron Man movie, you want to see Iron Man doing stuff, and Tony spends a large chunk of that movie just being Tony, and I kind of get it, because if it's just the suit, then the suit is, there's like 200 Iron Man suits. And so you want to show like it's the human who's important, but also you're paying money to go see an Iron Man movie and you want to see him doing some Iron Man stuff. And then like I didn't really think that the whole Iron Patriot thing, I didn't really care for that. But like I thought the reveal that the Mandarin was just some white guy who was like, the idea that Aldrich Killian is essentially, he's like Palpatine from the prequels. Like he's playing both ends and he's profiteering no matter what. I found that to be 100 times more interesting than an Asian warlord with magic rings. I still think the idea of like the Mandarin is like, he's a criminal or a crime lord or something, and he's got these special rings. That itself, I don't think is very interesting. In this movie, I do like his Wenwu's character motivation, but overall, like I was 100% on board with the Mandarin reveal in Iron Man 3. I feel like going back and saying, just kidding, there was a real Mandarin the whole time. I feel like that makes Iron Man 3 make less sense, because it would be like if Osama bin Laden was a real terrorist, and then I decided that I was going to get on TV and say, my name is Osama bin Laden, and I am a terrorist, and I am, terrorizing America. And then the real Osama bin Laden came after me for appropriating his name. Like this reveal that, Aldrich Killian called himself the Mandarin, or was using Trevor as the Mandarin, and then the real Mandarin is like, hey, don't do that. Like that that makes the events of Iron Man 3 make absolutely no sense to me. And it boggles my mind at so many people, because there was a little short that what's his name, Trevor Ben Kingsley was in. I never watched it because just the concept of it I thought was insulting, that he's in prison and he finds out there's a real Mandarin. I thought that was idiotic. I still don't really understand it. I get that they were like, oh wait, there's backlash. Just kidding, there is a real Mandarin, but I don't like it. I've been talking way too long. Do you have any
That's
thoughts
okay.
on that?
Yeah. So what I like how they try to handle that here. It's that I think the way I don't know who wrote this, but Cretton, the director, I think what he does, I guess, to kind of keep try to keep some integrity to Iron Man 3, and that big line that Guy Pearce has of "I'm the Mandarin, Tony. I'm the Mandarin." He does kind of try to keep that, because this character played by Tony Leung Wenwu, he doesn't call himself the Mandarin. The Mandarin was a name made up by Aldrich Killian. And what he took more issue with was somebody appropriating the Ten Rings organization, which was his shadow organization. And he has like this monologue in this about how when they tried appropriating his team, I don't know, like the iconography of his organization, the leader of that was some like orientalized terrorist kind of general people's fears of East Asian or Asian, Middle Eastern, East Asian sort of bad, yellow terror kind of iconography, and threw it all into a blender and called it the Mandarin. And I don't know, I thought that was a neat kind of concept. I guess my issue with I do I guess have like kind of an issue with just like the way they tried even incorporating the Mandarin into this story is that it does feel a little I don't know, half-hearted, or at least it feels very self-conscious. And I think there's a difference between being self-aware and self-conscious, because what you were talking about with like, I feel like the people making this movie kind of looked at what they had, where it was like, okay, we did the Mandarin in Iron Man 3, and there was some backlash to it, and then there was even a short that had Scoot McNairy from Batman v Superman. He would later be in Batman v Superman, but Scoot McNairy is playing this journalist who works for what he calls the real Mandarin and kidnaps Ben Kingsley out of prison. And they're just kind of looking at that and going, okay, how do we make this work? And what they chose to do was sort of, I don't know, I think the decision does kind of give some validity to Aldrich Killian. He is the only Mandarin, but there's a different Ten Rings organization that's a real Ten Rings organization. The one error here that I think that I can really detect is who are the organization that kidnapped Tony in the first Iron Man then? Is that actually the Ten Rings? Were they working with Obadiah Stane at one point? Or is that some like co-opted version of the Ten Rings as well? I don't really know. They don't really go into detail about that.
Yeah, and I don't know. I could probably do the timeline in my mind. If Shang-Chi was born in 1996, and he was what, 8 or 10 when his mom died, somewhere around then. So then 2006-ish is when Wu put the rings back on. So in theory, the real Ten Rings organization would have been back up and running at that point when Tony was kidnapped in 2008. But we're not told. And maybe this is, like I said, I have not seen the All Hail the King or whatever, Hail to the Chief, whatever that short was called. Maybe this is more of a problem with that, but I feel like maybe it would have been better instead of saying that Aldrich Killian claimed to be ruling the Ten Rings and the real Ten Rings was out there active. Maybe it would have worked better if in All Hail the Chief, if they had said Aldrich Killian had borrowed some of our men. Like he needed to start an operation, and then he created a false head of this operation, and our real boss thought that was hilarious, and he let Aldrich Killian have these men working for him. Maybe I would have liked that a little better. I don't know.
Okay.
And I know we're lingering on what amounts to about a minute of this movie. And I should point out in the comics, I've read like maybe 3 issues with Shang-Chi in the comics. He appeared in like 2 issues of X-Men in the 90s. He was just barely, he was a cameo, but he really didn't need to be an issue. And I read like a What If issue from the 80s. In the comics, he was introduced in the 70s. And at the time, Marvel had the license to a literary character called Fu Manchu, who was created back in the 30s by Sax Rohmer. You were talking about like the Yellow Peril villains that were basically very racist stereotypes. Dr. No is kind of like that also. That's what Fu Manchu was an embodiment of. And in the 70s, I believe it was Steve Gerber and maybe Doug Monk co-created Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi is the son of Fu Manchu. And that they could not use Fu Manchu in the movies because they no longer have the rights to that character. The rights reverted back to the Romer estate. So they had to fill in that void with some other vaguely racist stereotype. And so they looked at the Mandarin, who I've never understood why people like the comic book Mandarin. I don't think he's very interesting. He comes from, like, you look at the 1960s appearances by him, and it's embarrassing. So I will give many props to the actor here who plays him in this movie, because I think he's doing a very good job with a character type that wasn't very fleshed out before. But so they're inventing a lot of stuff for this movie. So in theory, they didn't even have to connect this to Iron Man 3. They could have created a brand new character, or they could have, had something that is wink, wink. It's not Fu Manchu. This was probably the easiest solution, but then you do open up a can of worms of how do we reconcile this with Iron Man 3.
Yeah, I think I guess I'm coming down a little bit different than you are. I like the way it reconciles Iron Man 3. I don't really like that we brought Trevor back personally, but as far as the way we kind of just address that movie, and the way Aldrich Killian, we addressed that elephant in the room, I think, in a pretty, I would say, decent way. But I guess if we're just gonna kind of now shift into talking about this movie's interpretation of, the Mandarin Wenwu, as they call him, I don't know. I'm of two minds. I think what we have is decent, and I think the acting by Tony Leung is great. He is one of the most celebrated actors of. I think he comes from Hong Kong. I think because he's in a lot of films that are directed by Wong Kar-wai, like In the Mood for Love and Chungking Express, Happy Together. But he's also in like John Woo's Hard Boiled. He's in that movie Hero that had Jet Li in it. He's in a lot of, he's in some of Ang Lee's movies. He's in the movie Infernal Affairs, which got remade into The Departed. So he's in like some of the most celebrated international movies ever, and so him being in this movie is kind of a big deal. I mean, I guess I don't know if there is like really. I mean, okay, it is kind of a big deal, but a lot of like really celebrated actors just kind of show up because they paid him a lot. But him being in here is, I think, really really cool, regardless of a lot of famous actors who are credible showing up in these Marvel movies. But he's great. I think he's great, and I think that you know when he's on screen and like he's kind of just doing his thing, like I like the character they made. Then there's like him in the wider context of the movie, and that's where I do sort of have a little bit of like my brain starts going in the direction of what could have been, and like I don't know. I know that what I'm kind of grappling with here is an unknowable, so it's kind of just pointless to speculate about this. But I can't help but wonder if like, so I like this movie, I enjoy it, but I kind of get bored with it. It's not a movie that really lingers in my brain a whole lot, and I feel like it could have benefited from being a little weirder, a little bit more comic booky and out there. And I think that when it comes to the way they do the Ten Rings, it does feel like a pretty generic crime organization. There's nothing really, I think, special about it. And like visually or just even like the way that the Ten Rings is implemented, they're just kind of like a, I don't know, like at least the League of Shadows was like ninjas in Batman Begins. These are just like guys that have like guns, and one of them has like a big blade for an arm, and that's kind of it. With with the Mandarin though, I kind of can't help but wonder like, okay, what if they did just try doing like a Yellow Peril stereotype, but they really went into it and like tried to like, I don't know, like what if this was like a, I don't know, this is an Asian filmmaker, a primarily Asian cast and crew. Like, what if they kind of went in and like sort of reclaimed that sort of stereotype and like sort of went into it and like completely reinvented it from the ground up and like kind of co-opted those offensive aesthetics in a way that was maybe empowering. But of course, like that's I'm just a white dude. I really have I have no insight to the Asian experience. Maybe that wouldn't have worked, or that didn't, they had no interest in doing that. I don't know, and I'm just kind of speculating about something that could have been. But as is, like I like the performance of the guy leading the Ten Rings. I just find the Ten Rings kind of boring as is, though.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I wasn't really thinking about that, but I would say I don't know how they could have made the Ten Rings more interesting, unless like, you know, like I think in Iron Man 2, there's one part where what's his name? Whiplash is like getting ready to attack Tony, and he gets something or pays for something with this guy. And I think I remember reading that as far as what's his name who plays Happy
John
as far as
Favreau.
Jon Favreau. As far as he was concerned, that was an agent of the Ten Rings. And so, like, if Jon Favreau had had his way, we probably, like, the Ten Rings would have been slowly built up. And then, like, you would get this big reveal, and you would find out, like, oh, okay, they were behind this and they were behind that. And maybe it would have been cool if we could have had something like that. But unfortunately, like, at this point, a lot of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is kind of already, like, the ground has already been mapped out, if you will. And so, like, when you have like an in game, like that's a Thanos story. There's really no room to say, oh, the Ten Rings were doing this over here. And so, like, the only thing I can think of where you would be like, yeah, this would help make the Ten Rings more interesting would be to say they've been doing all this stuff all along, but in story they were deactivated for however long. Like whenever Wenwu took the rings off, they were no longer in action, I guess. And so I, you're right. Like the Ten Rings themselves are not, they don't do a whole lot. And I think maybe that's because the movie wants to focus more on the familial relationship between Shang-Chi, his
And
sister, and his father.
I guess what I'm speaking about more is the concept of the Ten Rings.
Hmm.
If they just kind of went weirder with it, I don't really know what that looks like. But this just looks like a bunch of guys standing around in like a concrete box, and there's like one of them has like a metal arm or a sword arm, which I mean that's cool and all, but like he just feels like a complete anomaly within the context of the Ten Rings. So I don't know. I guess I am speaking more conceptually, as I don't want them to necessarily like take over like the movie, because
Hmm.
I think having it be a dynamic, like here's Shang-Chi, here's his sister, here's Aquafina, here's the dad, like yeah, that having that be the primary centerpiece, I think that's the correct thing, right? Like for your story that's you're telling, and they put the focus there, that's cool. And I guess what I'm talking about is like this movie does spend a lot of time world building, and a lot of that is kind of centered around Ta Lo. But like, what if this thing looking for Ta Lo also had this really cool world that it was? Because this is like a hidden world of like international assassins and like criminals and whatnot. And you don't need to like give me an exposition dump about them, but maybe allude to things that makes the Ten Rings really cool. Because as the ending post credit scene comes, it tells us that the Ten Rings will return, and I don't know. I'm not particularly excited to see the Ten Rings again.
Yeah, and I guess maybe this is a situation where they could only do so much in this movie. Maybe in whatever form they return. Again, this is a spoiler podcast. Shang-Chi's sister is in charge of the group now, so maybe they will be like we will get to see more of an in-depth explanation or exploration of this concept in this team. Like, is she going to keep them as a criminal organization, or are they going to be slightly more morally gray? Like maybe they're almost like a vigilante organization. Like, there's potential there for them to do something. And so, but you're saying you would have rather they had taken that option and do it here.
Well, kind of. Okay, the example I'll use is this. You know how in The Empire Strikes Back they go to Bespin, and Bespin is like they go to Cloud City on Bespin, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And Landau Calrissian kind of explains that, um, like they primarily like sell fuel or they sell something in Cloud City, and that's kind of just like there's no reason why Bespin needs to be a city in the clouds, right? Or Cloud City needs to be a city in the clouds. What I'm saying is like this would like what the Ten Rings feels like to me is that yes, from a completely utilitarian standpoint, like Han Solo and Leia and Chewie, they could have just gone to some town on some planet, but there being a city in the clouds is just like cool detail that makes the world feel more interesting.
Hmm.
And what I'm saying is what this movie's version of the Ten Rings is to me is if they just went to some town on some planet. There's
I
nothing
got you.
wrong with there being some town on some planet, and but they didn't go to the city in the clouds. And I guess if we're using that same analogy, um, now the town that in this hypothetical version where they didn't go to Cloud City, they went to some town on some planet. It's like, well, now the town has a new mayor. It's like, okay, the town could be cool in the future, but I don't know. That's the I guess moving forward with the Ten Rings cliffhangers, it's like, okay, now it's being led by a girl boss, and they're allowed to paint on the walls, but it's still just kind of the same thing to me.
Do you think maybe they kind of forced themselves to rein themselves in because of Iron Fist and the Hidden City of Kunlun?
Maybe. Maybe that is the case, but I also think like Ta Lo is allowed to be a little like more mystical and crazy and out there.
Yeah.
So I don't.
Uh,
I feel like I'm really belaboring this point, and I apologize. It's not that big of a deal to me, but it is like kind of indicative of a larger problem that I have with this movie, which is like I kind of wish like while I enjoy it, I kind of wish there are these details that could have been even cooler to me, and I would have liked this movie more.
I think I agree with you. I would never have landed on that point myself, but hearing you explain it, I agree with what you're saying. Um, do we want to talk about the main character who
Uh,
we barely even gotten into him?
that's a great idea, man. Yeah. What do you think of Shang?
I like him. I found myself so at one point there is I think I can't remember if it's a flashback to his mom telling him this or if it's his aunt. I think it's his aunt telling him that you have good and bad in you. Your mom is the good and your dad is the bad, and you need to like accept both before you're able to like move forward. And around that point, I started asking myself, wait a minute, where's the bad in him? And then we find out that when he was, I think, 14, his dad sent him to kill the man responsible for killing his mom. And earlier in the movie, he told us that he couldn't go through with it, so he fled to America. But then we find out later that he did go through with it. And I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of their way of saying he's got a little bit of his dad in him and a little bit of his mom. But also, the movie makes a point of saying, like, any 14-year-old, if their parent tells them, like, you have to pay a blood debt, like, you're 14. You can't really, like, when you're an adult, you can't really blame yourself for that because your parent is manipulating you into doing something that they know they shouldn't be doing. And you, as a kid, yes, when you're 14, you know not to murder, but he was raised in an environment where he was put into that situation. And so at the end of the movie, like where it's saying like he needs to like move forward and accept that his dad is part of him, I don't think I entirely buy that. I feel like it's still like he's mostly his mother's son, and he spends nearly the whole movie like resisting his dad. And at the end of the movie, it is telling us, look, he's finally accepted that his dad is part of him, but I don't really think I buy it.
Okay, and I think they're trying to visually represent that with him getting the rings from his dad.
Mm-hmm.
Like he gets like the cool super suit from his mother's village. So like, oh, that's his mother, and he gets the rings, and that's his father. Um, but yeah, no, I think I see where you're coming from. I think that them talking about how you can't really you're technically a minor just because you were put in this situation from your father. I don't know. I can believe that he still feels guilt over that and see that as his father's influence on him because while he was a minor, he's not necessarily responsible, like legally speaking. Like he was still like controlled by his father, and I can see why he could internalize that as he is sort of his father's son in that way, and that death will always be on his hands and something like that. Um,
Uh,
oh, sorry, what were you gonna say?
no, I was done with that point. You go ahead.
Oh, I was done at that point too. What I like about Shang-Chi, what I like about him is that like when we first meet him, he's just like a really cool dude. He's very likable. I think this actor's pretty darn good. Um, and I like that they don't really go into this, but this is just something you can kind of, in hindsight, see is that he grew up in this environment that he feels guilt about, and he seems to really enjoy Katie as a friend, kind of because of her lack of ambition. Because his dad was this super ruthless and like super ambitious guy, and I don't know. He sort of I kind of take it as he sort of associates ambition with the badness that some people can be ambitious with, and so the movie doesn't feel condescending in the way it kind of observes like slackers or whatever. It does sort of, like it's kind of like there's an endearing quality about his like relative lack of motivation in life, and I kind of like the way it handles that, and I like that he appreciates the mundane aspects of life.
Yeah, because you look at like most of our characters in the MCU, very few of them are just like average, ordinary Joes. Like Iron Man is a billionaire CEO. Captain America was a soldier and he's a man out of time, so he doesn't really, even though he's like, I mean, he's like a shield agent in his spare time. So like he's not really a mundane guy. Like Black Widow is an agent. Like Hawkeye, I guess, is an agent. Maybe like it's nice to see somebody who I don't know what's going to happen with Shang-Chi in the future, but like like as was pointed out in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, like being a superhero doesn't pay the bills, and so like even though he's now got the rings, he's probably still going to have to go back to a 9 to 5 job, and it's kind of cool getting to see that aspect of this universe being explored a little bit more.
And even at the end of this movie, it was an adventure that happened pretty much entirely in the shadows. Like
Mm-hmm.
nobody knows who he is, right? Like I don't think they'll be selling ice cream flavors from Ben and Jerry's that are named after Shang-Chi after this movie in
Right.
universe.
There are a few people who know about him, but all like the general public doesn't.
Yeah.
Although they do know him as Busboy, and I want to take that, if you don't mind, to segue into something I didn't think I would appreciate. I really like 2/3 of the action scenes in this movie. Very rarely do I engage much with action scenes. Most of the time, my eyes just kind of gloss over whenever a big action scene happens, because most of the time that's very rarely where any character stuff is going on. Like I'm more interested in characters talking and having a discussion than I am characters punching each other and shooting laser beams. But this movie, there were 2 action scenes I was very impressed with. The school bus fight scene, or not school bus, the public transport bus, the fight scene on that, and later when they're on the scaffolding. I thought both of those were really well done. And I was thinking about how, like in the Black Widow movie, like it's not that I don't know what's going on, but it's that I just don't care what's going on. Like when they're on the big floating space station thing, and then like this regular non-powered human is like flying through the air and metal shards are not like slicing her in half. Like I just kind of disconnect with the movie during those scenes. But in this, like in the bus scene, I thought it was very well done. Like at any given point in a scene, I knew, okay, like at one point, Shang-Chi says the back of the bus is about to go. And in the back of my mind, I said, wait a minute, there's a whole bunch of civilians on the back of the bus. And then it cuts, and there's a whole bunch of civilians on the back half of the bus. And I thought it's unique. This could have been like, they're walking, like, I don't know, walking home from work, and it's nighttime and there's no civilians on the street, and it's just like a generic street that this fight is happening. But this is a scene we haven't really seen anything like this before. I don't think we've really seen anything like the scaffolding fight before. So I really like those 2 scenes.
I would agree. I'm a big fan of the bus fight scene. I even like the opening dance fight between the Mandarin and Shang-Chi's dad. Sorry, Shang-Chi's mom and dad.
Yeah.
I like that sort of dancing fight scene. It's kind of silly, but I like how seriously the movie takes it. Like there's no winking with it. And honestly, like that scene felt the most influenced by like Eastern Asian film to me. I like that quite a bit. And the scaffolding fight's pretty good. I like the fight that Shang-Chi has against his sister, as short as it is. But I think once it does sort of become a big third act battle scene and like a car chase through the trees and like all that stuff, I got pretty bored by it. It was pretty standard Marvel movie, standard like kind of generic blockbuster, and my eyes did kind of glaze over a little bit. But yeah, no, for a while I really like it, and honestly, it kind of makes me the action again. I'm just gonna go back into the stupid speculating place. It makes me wish the action was more kung fu oriented. In the comic books, Shang-Chi is master of kung fu, right?
Yeah.
That's what he's listed as. Why didn't this movie just end with a kung fu fight between Shang-Chi, his sister, and their dad? I don't know. That to me is more interesting and kind of more at the heart of what the story is than dragons flying around and sucking souls and like an army of 30 people firing arrows and you know I don't know it gets like so big and it kind of they try to have his dad and him having like a tender moment or like trying to like resolve some tension in the middle there, but that stuff feels diluted when there's all this other stuff happening. And even after his father has dies, which is like the centerpiece of the conflict, there's now it just keeps going. There's a bigger dragon we got to take care of now. It's like, oh my god, okay. But I don't know. I watched that bus action scene, and it's like this is actually a pretty, by a normal movie standard, this is like a big action scene. Why isn't this like end of Act Two? But it's like the first one,
Mhm.
and it's like I don't know. I kind of wish this was more of like centered around martial arts and like the story was less centered around fantasy stuff. I don't know, and I'm saying that because the stuff I really like from this movie is primarily in the first half, and it is when the action scenes are more kung fu oriented and there's like a greater sense of danger. I feel.
I agree. I also lose a little bit of interest in this movie by the time they get to Tao. Is it Tao Lo? Um,
Yes, yeah.
I kind of lost a little bit there. I was so confused. I think there is one part in the movie when Shang-Chi's father is showing his children. He says, I've been speaking with your mother. She's trapped somewhere." And he has like a book, and there's like 1 second where you see a dragon on that page, and then he turns the page, and then you go to Tao Lo, and Shang-Chi is like falling in the water like Skyfall, and then like suddenly a dragon comes out of the water. And I actually said out loud, "What?" I was like, when did this happen? When did this thing get set up? And then I remembered, I was like, oh yeah, there was like half a second where we saw a dragon on a page in a book. But I was so, and like all of the villagers of Tao Lo seemed surprised to see the dragon. Like, we've never seen this thing before. And then the old man who is kind of partnered up with Aquafina, he says, if the big evil dragon steals the soul of our dragon, it'll be invincible and we won't be. And I was like, how do you know this? You didn't even know there was a dragon. And so yeah, I was really not into like the supernatural elements here. I don't know how they could have ended it. Maybe just have like, because apparently the Dweller in Darkness is a real character in the Marvel universe. I've never heard of him before. I was almost 1,000% sure that one of these dragons was supposed to be like a wink wink reference to Fin Fang Foom, who is a big green dragon. I know nothing about Fin Fang Foom other than he has a silly name, and I thought, oh, they're going to do Fin Fang Foom, but they're not going to call him that because that's a silly name, and we can't do silly. But apparently, no, neither of these dragons are supposed to be Fin Fang Foom. But I don't know, maybe like to your point, I also was much more interested in the martial arts aspects of this movie. So maybe they could have just had the Dweller of Darkness as like a spiritual demon that possesses Wenwu, and then Shang-Chi has to fight the physical form of his father, but it's now like none of the love. Now he's like, I'm evil because I'm a demon inside your father. And so then you could still do a martial arts fight. Like, that would have been more visually interesting, I think, than the CGI vomit on the screen.
Yeah, and I guess I'm coming at it from just drop Ta Lo altogether. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like
okay.
that's like kind of what I'm at. Where it's like, yeah, I don't know, just drop the fantasy stuff and just sort of make it a more personal family drama where you can keep Aquafina and you can keep the sister and Shang-Chi, but how about instead of a big like drive through like a maze of trees and then getting associated with a completely brand new cast of supporting characters in like the last 30 minutes, you just sort of you know midpoint brother and sister buddy up, and then they're kind of running away from their father, and then okay, now we got to confront her father. I don't know, something like lower stakes. It's like I feel like specifically like the Shang-Chi character, because I like him a lot. I think and based on this movie, like I like him more in the low stakes situations. Keep him there. Because if I had to like give a blurb about this movie, I want more Sean, less Shang-Chi. Um,
Okay. Okay.
because in my head, I associate Shang-Chi with the mystical stuff, the supernatural fantasy elements when they go to Ta Lo and he has to like get a dragon scale suit of armor and that's his super suit. Like I like Sean, I like the relatable, normal, everyday guy, and I feel like he gets lost in the shuffle of this movie. This is I guess I'm gonna, I don't know. Do you have a feeling about that? Because I have another point I want to get into, but like that'll take a minute. So
I think I agree with you. I do like Sean. I like him better in the beginning of the movie. But I really do like the. So for a long time, the MCU's biggest issue was the weak villains. Like everything about Iron Man is pretty solid, and then you've got a villain who's just evil. And like that was kind of a recurring problem up until, I mean, it was relatively late in the game. Like I don't know when we got our first like legitimately good villain, but like I mean I think Ego was really good, Killmonger was really good, the Vulture was good, Thanos was good. That was, that was just like within the last like 3 years, right? And so like with this movie, I wasn't sure what to expect. I like that Winwoo is not just I'm evil and I want you to be my heir. You ran away to America. You defied the family, and I'm gonna backhand you, and you're coming back, and I'm gonna train you to be the heir to this empire, whether you like it or not. That would have been pretty one-dimensionally mustache twirly. Um, I like that his motivation is I really legitimately loved your mother, and I want her back, and I think that I can bring her back, and everyone else is saying no, this is really dangerous. um, I don't know how you would do that subplot without Tao Lo. Maybe you could find a way. Maybe you could just say like it's in a regular part of China and it's not a hidden mystical city. And maybe you could have your big fight scene there. I do like the Winwoo, his character motivations. I don't know. I know we kind of already talked about the Ten Rings and
Yeah.
stuff already,
Well,
but
and you're right. The version of the movie we got does, require like a kind of mystical element of like bringing someone back from the dead. And in the movie we got, I do like Wenwu's character motivation. And even though I lose interest throughout this movie, it kind of the more it goes on, that's the strong part of the movie. And I feel like in the version of the movie I want, you would have to make the villain and his subplot less interesting. But I feel like it would strengthen the main character a little bit more.
that's fair. Um, and this is an interesting unit in the MCU because, like I said, up until we got to like Guardians 2 and in that era, like the hero portion of the movie was usually pretty strong, and it was usually the weak portion of the movie was the villain. And so this is kind of an inversion of that, where, in my opinion, maybe it sounds like you agree also, the villain is handled pretty interestingly, but Sean himself starts off like we like where what we're seeing of him, and then like you said, we introduce like 15 other characters in Tao Lo, and then he's kind of just there to fight his dad.
Yeah. So that's actually a good segue into my next point. I'm gonna try to say this as quick as possible, but I don't know, maybe grab a bag of chips or some popcorn or something. This might take a second. I feel like the best and worst thing to really happen to the MCU was the Captain America: The Winter Soldier, because I feel like where we're at right now with Black Widow and now Shang-Chi, like this is obviously more you can draw more parallels directly to the Black Panther movie, but I think the tendencies that I'm about to lay out are more established in something like The Winter Soldier, where Winter Soldier, pretty pretty good movie, right? I would say it's an upper tier Marvel movie. Would you say so, Comic
Yeah,
Skip?
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's cool about that movie is that while you're watching it, you know, the ending of that movie just keeps stacking more pancakes on top of the stack, right? We got three helicarriers that we need to take down, and the Winter Soldier is going to show up to cause some conflict, for Steve, and Agent 13 is going to be in the middle of doing something, and Natasha's got to fight this person, and we have Falcon fighting uh, Crossbones, and it just keep and there's and then like it just keeps adding stuff to the mix. But while you're watching that movie's done such a good job of making you interested and keeping you invested, and you like the characters, and so when they keep adding new twists to the threat at the end, you almost welcome it, and it does sort of feel like they keep putting in more fireworks into the fireworks show, and it's exciting. And that works because that movie's really good. And I would say that ever since then, it feels like every Marvel movie tries to have that big ending like Winter Soldier.
Hmm.
And what also Winter Soldier does is it really fills up the supporting cast side of things, and they keep adding supporting characters, and every supporting character needs something to do in the climax of the movie. And so, cut to Black Panther. That movie kind of got the character arc of the main character really done in Civil War. So they really tried fleshing out the supporting cast and the world that the main character inhabits. That was kind of more of the priority. And T'Challa still has a character arc in that movie, but it does feel like the movie is trying to do more than just take care of their main character, right?
Hmm.
Um, But then you get like Black Widow and Shang-Chi, and I feel like these two movies are like structurally identical. And I like this movie more than Black Widow. But when I look at these two movies, what I see is a first act that is like pretty darn solid. You introduce your main character, you do a good job of kind of showing their day to day. You have like a supporting character, maybe two, and the action scenes in the first act are the best action scenes in the whole movie. I like the first fight between Black Panther and Taskmaster. That is the first instance that you get where the villain is onto the hero. And then in this movie, I really like the bus fight, which is the first time you get an instance that the villain is after the hero. And then in both of these movies, I feel like the second act sort of demotes the main character to like it feels like the first act feels like you're watching a movie about one main character. And then the second act of both Shang-Chi and Black Widow feel like they just make it an ensemble piece where the main character sort of gets demoted a little bit. Um, and in doing so, the main character sort of gets moved from one location to another, to another, to another. And the more they move around, they just keep adding more supporting characters. In Black Widow, that was the family members they keep adding. And then in this movie, it is, the sister, the dad, Trevor, Michelle Yeoh. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they just keep adding more characters. And each new character is just kind of there to give them more exposition. And I feel like the main character kind of gets lost in the shuffle. And then the final act of this movie and in Black Widow, it tries to recenter the movie on the main character, but I feel like they got lost somewhere in the mix of the second act. And the big battle scene at the end has to include all of the supporting characters they brought along the way as well. And that kind of dilutes what should be the prominent conflict at the heart of it. So I've been going on for a little while there, but that's just an issue I've been noticing with the MCU, particularly with Black Widow and Shang-Chi.
Yes. I remember you when you did your podcast with Captain Logan and some who I'm sorry, who was it you did your podcast on WandaVision with Captain Logan?
That was Austin.
Austin, I apologize, Austin. You mentioned this with WandaVision, how like every character has to have something to do, and my brain tells me yes, every character should have something to do in the climax. Otherwise, why is this character here? But my heart tells me that you are right in what you're saying, and that like doing this, we are like at the end of the movie, Shang-Chi just kind of rides a dragon around, and the dragon actually does more than he does. Like, he eventually shoots rings into Evil Dragon, and it, defeats it. But like, there's a whole lot of like, Aquafina has to have her moment where she shoots an arrow, and then like, sister, he grabs her, and like, it's a pretty good little moment between brother and sister where he abandoned her when he was a kid, and now he refuses to let go. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
But you're right. Like, I'm thinking of like in Winter Soldier. Like, I don't remember the last time I watched Winter Soldier. It's been well over a year, probably closer to well over 2 years. But I still have burned into my brain Steve saying like, "I'm with you to the end of the line." Like, that scene. Like, again, I usually don't care about the action, but for me, like in the climax, I remember Steve, reaching out to his former friend more than boom, explosion, and boom, punch to the face, and stuff like that. And so in this, we do get, like I said, the sister where he grabs the sister and refuses to let go. But other than that, there's not a whole lot here that really registers to me in the final act as like this was a pretty cool moment for Shang-Chi.
I would agree, and I guess the comparison I would use is that at the end of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, yes, I'm going to say it that way to any international listeners, just deal with it. At the end of the first Harry Potter movie, Harry's got to go face Voldemort alone, right? You have Ron and Hermione there. They help him out with the tasks, and then at the end, he's got to go alone, and that's fine. You still have, in the last act, kind of leading up to the ending, you still give your supporting character something to do, but then you remember who the main character is and you let them, self-actualize and save the day, right? That's what I think you ought to do if your intention is to make your movie about the main character.
Yes, that's a good point. And I was thinking about like Aquafina, she's basically just a civilian. Like, 24 hours before this fight scene, she had never picked up a bow, and now suddenly she's like a master archer, and she's able to like save the universe by shooting an arrow so that Shang can save his sister, and then he can shoot rings into a dragon mouth. And like maybe you remember in The Dark Knight Rises when Joseph Gordon-Levitt has the kids on the bridge, and like it keeps cutting back to them. And if we're being honest, we probably didn't need to see them, where he's like, "All right, kids, put your heads between your knees. The atomic bomb is coming. Everything's gonna be fine." Yeah, he probably didn't need those scenes, but it gives him something to do. But he's not there with Batman on the roof. Maybe I'm running in circles because that's not a great example, because you also have Gordon and Catwoman on the roof. I agree with you is what I'm saying. Maybe we could have found a way to keep the sister and Aquafina busy, but not necessarily right there in the center of the fight. I think is what we're both.
I guess to help you out with your analogy, it's like Batman is the one who has to go take the bomb away from the city. It's not like Gordon is in the back seat, trying to find coordinates, and Catwoman's on top of the bomb trying to like deactivate the bomb just last minute. Hopefully she can. And on top of that, Joseph Gordon-Levitt's not in the fighter pilot trying to shoot Bane's, people who are trying to shoot him down or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's not that. It's just, okay, Batman's gonna go do a thing.
Yeah.
But
did I tell you about, there was a podcast that came out when The Dark Knight Rises came out? So where they were saying that, because at this point when The Dark Knight Rises came out, we were already getting trailers for Man of Steel, and somebody said like it would have just absolutely destroyed the narrative focus of the movie, but they would have like laughed themselves out of the theater if like when the bomb like is there in Gotham, and then Superman just comes in and grabs the bomb and like takes it in outer space and like throws it in space. I every now and then I still think of that, and still thinking like that'd be interesting. I wonder what kind of world that would have been if we had gotten that. Anyways,
Batman does just like legit retire because he's like, nothing else I can do.
He just gives the keys to the Batmobile to Superman. It's like, here, she's all yours.
This is why Superman works alone. So, I guess I should say, in a movie called Shang-Chi, that's what I'm talking about now. Getting back to the movie, in a movie where they really went into like East Asian influence, and we're really celebrating that culture. I think it's really cool that the big moment at the end is a big reference to The Hobbit, storied East Asian mythology.
In The Hobbit, the Bilbo has a ring, and in this he uses rings to kill the dragon.
No. The point I'm trying to make is like Aquafina fires her bow into like the neck of a dragon.
Oh, okay. I was like struggling. I was like, oh, what am I gonna do? I gotta say something funny.
Sorry.
No, I was thinking about that. Not to do two Red Letter Media references in one video, but I believe in the Red Letter Media review for the first Hobbit movie, they mentioned something about how like narratively it's really weird how like you're spending all this time with Bilbo and these dwarves, and then it's just some guy who shoots the dragon. And I was kind of thinking about that, like, Awkwafina's fine in this movie, and I never thought I would say that. But she, she's the one, like without her, like the whole thing falls apart. And it really does seem like for a minute, it seems like it's more her movie than his.
Well, and that's the other thing, kind of going back to like the Harry Potter thing I was talking about. You set up Hermione as a smart character, and in the climax, you have her do the smart thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we established that Ron likes playing chess. So when they have to play, wizard's chess, Ron is there to help do that, right? And then he gets, the point is there were setups for those characters, and then there are the payoffs. And then in this movie, we set Katie up as she drives cars really well.
Mm-hmm.
And then her payoff for that character is that when they're driving to Ta Lo, she's really good at navigating the maze, right? Because she's good at driving. And then it's like, well, crap. We already did the big payoff for her character, and there's still 30 minutes left in the movie. Mm-hmm. So then they have to like do an entirely new thing to set her up with as, I don't know, bow and arrow. She's never touched one in her life, and then she like saves the day at the end. And that just felt weird to me. It felt like we need to give her a cool big girl boss moment at the end. Otherwise, why do we have this character around? It's like, well, we already got her reason for being around. You know what I mean? So
yeah. That's a good point. I hate that you are raising so many good points, Connor, because I am starting to. I will say I still like this movie, but a lot of what you're saying is like very meat and potatoes screenwriting logic. You set something up at the beginning and then you pay it off at the end. That's classic Chekhov's gun, and I wasn't thinking about that, but you're right. Like she kind of gets her big moment it like before they get to Tallow or like as they're going to Tallow. So yeah, good point. I'm trying to think. Do you want to talk about the sister? I don't really have a whole lot to say about her.
Yeah, let's talk about her. What
Uh,
do you got to say?
uh, I don't think that she's a very good actress. Maybe I'm being too harsh, but like there are several moments where I think it's that she doesn't have a lot of range in her face. This is gonna be super weird. Like I'm not trying to be mean, but like there's a couple of moments where she like at one point Shang is trying to ask somebody like, why did my father send you here? And then she like knocks that guy off the building. And it's supposed to be a like haha moment. And then she like looks at him and says, did your time in America make you soft? And like her facial expression there I can't tell if she's supposed to be like, haha, I just knocked him off the building while you were trying to interrogate him, or if this is supposed to be a kind of serious moment of like, did your time in America make you soft? And like, there's a few different moments, I can't think of every single one of them, where it will be either a serious or a funny moment, but I feel like she's always kind of making the same face. And maybe I'm just being too harsh. Maybe everyone else thinks she's a really amazing, but I kind of the whole time I was like, I couldn't really get what was going on with her.
I don't know. This character really did not make a lot of an impression on me.
Mhm.
She has like an angle, right? You weren't there for me. We get the payoff for that, or he doesn't let go. And I get why she's jaded. I like that she's sort of running this underground fight club. I think like the idea for the character is pretty solid, but in the story they're telling, there's just not a lot for her to do.
Yeah.
I have a question surrounding the character of the sister, though.
Okay.
So help me. Maybe you can answer this question for me because this is a thing I'm really confused about. Shang-Chi gets a postcard in the mail with a dragon on it. It's a drawing of an origami dragon, which I guess is a callback to their mom who made origami dragons with them when they were little babies. And it has an address on it. And so he says he got it like a week ago. He say it's like from his sister or something.
Yes.
And so then he assumes that's where she must be. So then he goes there. It is the sisters' underground fight club, and then the bad guys show up. And it felt to me like it was like a reveal that they were using him as like they kept him alive so that they could follow him and he could inadvertently lead them to the sister. But then it's also revealed that she didn't send the postcard. So that would
Yeah.
mean they knew where she was already. So why didn't they just why did they go through the trouble of sending him the postcard?
Yeah.
Um, I don't get that. And it's like, well, I guess they wanted them all in the same location. I guess, instead of going to fight Shang-Chi, they could have been very covert. And as he's getting off the bus, they could have just hit him with the chloroform and then
Hmm.
kidnapped him and then done the same with the sister. And that way they would have them all at the same place. I don't know. Like, it was just like a weird detail to kind of have this big, like, thread with and like reveals and stuff with the postcard. And it's like, I don't know. That felt like a weird decision. And like the rest of the movie's like, I've been more negative on this than I want to be. I like this movie. I enjoy it. But like that felt like lesser in quality than the rest of the movie writing wise, and I was confused by that.
It it doesn't make sense. You're right. They could have taken the postcard out. They could have had Shang-Chi is attacked on the bus. They steal the pendant, and then he tells Aquafina, "I need to go talk to my sister because they're very likely going to try and steal her pendant." And then you could just say that Shang-Chi, even though he abandoned her when he was a kid, that he has kept up with where she is and he knows about the Fight Club. So he goes there and then tries to warn her, and she's like, "Get out of my face! I don't need you." And then the bad guys show up and they try to steal her pendant, and that's when they get captured. Because later in the movie, when Wu says, "I've always known where my kids are," like I knew that you were living in San Francisco, so like it doesn't make sense. Like I'm assuming that the dad sent the postcard to Shang-Chi, but like you said, he already knows where both of his children are, or he says he does. And so then it doesn't really make sense that you're right. You've already explained why it doesn't make sense. They could have just taken the postcard out. I assume the only reason they didn't do the chloroform thing, because I was thinking the same thing, I'm assuming A, they want to have another really cool fight scene and let's show some of the weirdness of the Marvel Universe. And they want to show Wong in the movie. We'll have to talk about that because I've got some questions. And so we have to set him up here so that we can have him later in the post credit scene. But you're right. The postcard thing, none of it makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously they want to have a cool fight scene. And then maybe they also want to keep Aquafina around because why would these people, if they're going to chloroform him and kidnap him, why keep Aquafina around?
Yeah,
yeah. I guess to your point, you said like you never thought you would ever say that you thought she was pretty all right in this movie. I want to say this is the first time Aquafina I think has been in a primarily comedic role where I've really liked her. Now I will say the first time I ever saw Aquafina in anything was this movie called Ocean's 8. I'm not a big fan of that movie. It's not like horrible, but severe lack of Cate Blanchett. I'll say that much. She's like the coolest lady ever, and she's barely in that movie. But Aquafina, I thought was very, very annoying in that movie as primarily the comic relief. And she was in one other movie. It was Crazy Rich Asians, which I also found her very, very annoying in. And I thought, oh no, there's this new actress on the block that everyone's really into, and I just don't find her funny at all. But then she was in a movie called The Farewell, which is a pretty heavy drama movie where she's the lead. Sorry, Comics Kid, it's a foreign language movie. It's entirely in Chinese, but she's really, really good in it. And I thought, oh, maybe I just like her as a dramatic actress. And then she was in that movie, that Jumanji threequel, kind of the next level one. And she is primarily giving a dramatic performance, but it is a more comedic movie that she does have comic timing in, and I was like really impressed by her in that movie. And now there's this where she is primarily the comic relief, and compared to other like more recent Marvel comic relief, I thought she was a breath of fresh air. I liked her considerably more than like anything in Black Widow or the Falcon and the Winter Soldier or Loki or anything like that.
Yes. I've never thought she was very funny. I've also never seen her in any dramatic roles, but everyone acts like she is like hilarious. I've never really understood what people were seeing, but in this, I didn't hate everything that she said. There was some moments where I was like kind of rolling my eyes. Like there was the part where she starts singing Hotel California to try and confuse the ninja trying to kill her, and I was like, okay, but like there was moments that I thought were legitimately funny, like when Shang-Chi is trying to tell her his story on the plane and then they get interrupted by the stewardess. Maybe that joke goes on a little longer. I mean, it would have gone on like another 3 minutes if it was a James Gunn movie, but I I liked kind of her like her deadpan like, oh, so you don't have vegetarian and you don't have chicken, so I guess I'll have the beef since that's all you have. Like I thought that was kind of funny. I liked her little back and forth with the sister where she was like, I like your Fight Club. She said, I like your pants. I thought that was kind of funny. She had, I like your spiky face mask. I thought that was funny. I didn't, like you said, like she kind of has to go through like a second miniature character arc with the bow and arrow at the end, and she's talking about how like I never commit to one thing, so I get kind of good at something and then I just stop. And I was thinking like, why? Why do you just stop? Is it just to like stick it to your mom, or like is there like do you feel like you're not good enough at it so you just give up? Like I was like I said, this is probably my favorite thing of hers that I have seen her in, but I was just pleasantly surprised that I didn't hate everything she said.
Yeah, and I don't think all the jokes are laugh riots or anything. There are some groaners in there, but she knows when to stop. And maybe that's just the movie around her. Maybe that's also the director and the writing and whatnot. But you're right. There aren't jokes that go on for 3 minutes. I'm thinking about if this was Loki, that scene where, she stops the bus, by like crashing into a bunch of cars while she's like leaned up against a garbage truck, and she like, makes eye contact with the garbage truck driver. And in this movie, she says, "Hey, we make a good team." You know what I mean? She kind of has like two little things and then she's done. If this was like Loki, she'd be like, "Oh my gosh, wow, good job. I wouldn't have done it without you. You were like, woo, woo, woo," and I was like, "Ah, ah, ah." She would have gone on and on and on, and it would have been just the worst. But she didn't, and it was fine, and it was humorous, and it punctuated the scene in a way that was fine. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. I guess. Did you have anything else you want? Like, where else did you want to go?
We briefly mentioned it. I also didn't have to see Trevor come back. He was fine. I didn't hate it, but I didn't have to have him come back. I feel like that was probably like, well, this has already been set up in that one short that he's been kidnapped, so let's do it. Where did this little the fuzzy pig thing? Where did it come from? Because it came from Ta Lo. We know that, but when did it come from Ta Lo? Because both uh Shang-Chi and his sister, they do not recognize this creature. So it didn't come here when the mom left Ta Lo. So like we need a creature here to be a map to Ta Lo, except that at the beginning of the movie when the Mandarin says there's this secret city, I want to go there, they're like almost at Ta Lo when the trees throw the car in the cliff. Like they are like 90% there when the guy says the trees are moving. But in this, and then later when these guys are going, it's like immediately they're like, oh, you turn left, turn right, turn left, do all this stuff. And so I guess they were like, well, it wasn't that bad earlier, but now it's worse, so we need a navigator. But can did I miss the point where it explained where this creature came from? Like when he came
No,
to
that's a great question. Like,
Okay.
does Wenwu know there's a mystical creature living in his basement? Um, yeah. When did it get there? Earlier in that woods, like the moving woods. We don't see any creatures in that. I can't imagine it'd be easy for a creature to live inside those woods because they're so thick and they're always moving. And then on top of that, how would an animal know how to traverse that?
Right.
We only ever see animals once they enter Talo. This is all really creaky, I think, from a screenwriting standpoint.
Hmm.
And I also think it's a little disappointing that like we brought Trevor back. I think Ben Kingsley's funny. I like Trevor, and okay, they bring him as he's sort of like a prisoner who does shows for the people. I mean, that's a little like silly. Like that kind of infantilizes the Ten Rings in a way that I think is very kid movie ish.
Hmm.
Where there might be international criminals, but golly, they love laughing at Trevor Slattery, so that's why they keep him around, right? But but I thought it was disappointing because why did they really bring Trevor back? Well, he's really just there to like A, give exposition, and B, just interpret a faceless animal.
Yes.
Why does he, how can he understand the thing? Like, I don't really know. And also it's a little weird because, as I mentioned earlier, Katie driving through the woods, like that's sort of the payoff for her character arc, or at least the payoff for her skill. It's like kind of weird that, they have to pair that up with Ben Kingsley. And once they get to Ta Lo, they also run out of things for Ben Kingsley to do. So he just kind of has to sit around, and every once in a while they'll just cut back to him to say something goofy so you remember that he's there.
Yes. And I am going to assume that Trevor is just living in Ta Lo, except that I don't think he knows Chinese. And uh, other than
hey,
Michelle
hey,
Yeoh,
he was able to pick up the animal squeaks of that one animal Morris pretty easily. I think he can learn a new
yeah,
Chinese
that's
pretty
fair.
easily.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of Chinese, okay, so I was a little confused. First of all, at one point, Winwu says to Katie, he says, "What is your Chinese name?" Now, of course, she is Chinese. Her family is anyway. But I think it would have been kind of funny if she said, like, "You racist? I'm actually Japanese," or something like that. I don't know. Because maybe I don't know. Like when you see someone who's of a different color, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are of the specific nationality that you think they are. But anyway, they didn't go in that direction. But also, she says to the guy at the Fight Club, she says, "I don't know Chinese very well." But then later in Tao Lo, everybody is talking Chinese, and she seems to be picking up on it fine. So I was a little confused. How much Chinese does she know? Is she actually totally good at Chinese? And she just, for some reason, said she wasn't, or did the movie forget that she's not good at Chinese?
It's a good question. It feels like the last act of this movie is really creaky. um, yeah, I agree. Oh, we didn't really talk about the sister a whole lot. Speaking of which, that was another weird thing where it's like, welcome to Ta Lo. It's okay. It's everything. It's sort of like this magical wish fulfillment society. Don't worry, sister. You can have a girl boss moment in the climax because you don't get a train in hiding here. And it's like I feel like that whole thing just kind of infantilized that character a little bit. where it's like, okay, she should be like, I mean, I'm good at fighting. I don't really care about the empowerment of everyone, being allowed to train with everybody else. This would have been kind of nice if I was a little girl, but like I'm not anymore. So I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that was just kind of
Yeah.
like, it was, again, just like, we got to give her something to do. Ooh, wouldn't it be empowering if she got to train with everybody else because she wasn't allowed to train when she was younger? That felt like a kind of like a last minute thrown in kind of thing. Because I don't know, like, I mean, I'm it sounds like the Ten Rings are kind of sexist. Only dudes are allowed to train. But
Mhm.
if you're the leader of the organization and you're one child left and your only other child's a girl, I don't think you would care. You would probably just train the little girl, wouldn't you?
I would think so. And I think they kind of get into that a little bit where she says that her father could barely look at her because she reminded him of his wife.
Oh, that's right. I think that's good enough, I suppose.
But then also the aunt says to Shang-Chi, "You look just like your mother." And so I I think it would have been interesting if Shang-Chi had more of a like if he had more of a relationship with his mom and the daughter had I mentioned this I think the last time we spoke. I've been watching some Game of Thrones lately, and in Game of Thrones, Tywin Lannister hates his son Tyrion, but Tyrion, despite like he even though Tywin hates him, Tyrion is actually closer to being Tywin. Like he has more in common with Tywin than Tywin's other kids do. And so it would have been interesting if even though the Mandarin is like, you remind me too much of your mom, if she was like, no, really, I'm more like you. And Shang-Chi, who you want to be your heir, is more like mom. I don't know. That I don't know if we would have had room for that, but that could have been interesting.
I suppose so. Uh, yeah. I thought I had something to go on, but no, that was a good point. Um,
Well, I want to talk about Wong. Why is Wong fighting in a Chinese underground gladiator ring?
I guess being a sorcerer is not paying the bills anymore.
What? Yeah, and the whole time I was thinking about. And by the way, like I am not like some kind of super fan when it comes to the MCU. I don't dislike the MCU. I watch the movies and I enjoy them, but I don't go back and rewatch them very often because if I said to myself, I'm really in a mood to watch Thor, if you're like, well, I gotta also watch the Avengers because it continues Loki's thread, and then you might as well just watch all 38 movies or whatever. And again, you got to watch Agents of Shield and you got to watch Luke Cage and so like I don't go back and watch these movies a lot, but I was thinking about like, wait a minute, in Infinity War, I think Wong said he didn't know he didn't have any money because of like they don't value money in Carmitage. And then I was thinking like, wait a minute, is he like picking up money on the side over here? But I this is one of those things where like as we said, like franchise, franchise, franchise. This movie is setting up something with Shang-Chi, and so we have to introduce Shang-Chi to the rest of the Marvel universe. So at the end of the movie, Wong comes in and says, "Hey, we need to talk about those rings." And then Wong is his connection to Captain Marvel and Bruce Banner, and I have a question about that I'll ask
Yep,
later.
yep,
Uh,
yep.
but like, why is Wong fighting in a gladiator ring? Why is he okay with Emil Blonsky? Last we saw, Emil Blonsky was like arrested and taken to like super prison, and why is he just like able to like walk around and like he's totally chill with the Sorcerer Supreme sidekick? Like I and this is a like I think I'm the only human on the planet who actually likes the Edward Norton Incredible Hulk movie. I've been really wanting to see a follow up to The Leader and the Abomination for the last like 12 years or however long it's been. And this is so when I saw the Abomination in the trailer, I was really excited. And then a friend of mine said, no, he's in it for like 3 seconds. And I mean, literally, I would say almost all of his footage in this movie is in the trailer. But I when you just have him show up, but he doesn't even have any lines, and they don't even explain what he's been up to this whole time, I am a little confused.
I would agree.
Okay. Um,
I know that like at one point like Abomination was supposed to be at the opening scene of Age of Ultron,
yeah.
but they just couldn't get the schedule worked out with Tim Roth, so they had to, you know.
I wonder if they even used Tim Roth here. Like he doesn't have any lines, so they could have gotten like the key grip to like put some green dots on his face. Like it,
That's
they've
true.
changed the Hulk's face. Like in the Edward Norton movie, he looks a little bit more like Edward Norton, and then when you get to like the Avengers, he looks a little bit more like Mark Ruffalo. So they could have just said like it's been long enough. People have forgotten who Tim Roth is, so let's just say it's Abomination, but it doesn't have to look like him. Um, but yeah, maybe they'll use Abomination. That'd be cool. I'd like to
And
see that.
yeah, also this Abomination looked more like comic book Abomination with the sort of like amphibian ears, webby
Yeah.
ears. Um, yeah. So I have, something I kind of want to say. This is just kind of like a broader, I guess, critique of the movie. This movie just on a screenwriting level, or just even like an editing level, just sort of general construction of the movie level, I would use the word to describe it is like utilitarian.
Hmm.
Um, it's very traditionally laid out. Like you have a kind of a prologue off the top, right, with the history, and like it's almost exactly 10 minutes long. And then you get like 5 minutes with Sean and Katie getting acquainted with them, and then it's like 5, 6 minutes of an action scene. And then by 25 minutes in, that's when they get to wherever the sister is. You know what I mean? And then like by the time like they get to Kamertage, not well, my bad. By the time they get to Ta Lo, it's exactly an hour and a half into the movie. And then by the time it is over, by the time the first the initial credits start, it is exactly 2 hours into the movie. Like you know what I mean? Like it is so rigid in its structuring, and I wouldn't think to actually go back and look at the time codes of this, but like when I was watching this movie the first time, like it felt like it was moving at such a calculated pace, and when I was watching it the second time, I was really taking notice of how economic the dialogue was. A
Hmm.
lot of Because I like getting acquainted with Sean and Katie, but then you'll have that scene where they're talking with their friend from high school and her boyfriend or her fiance, who by the way looks almost exactly like Lin Manuel Miranda. I thought that's who that was. I was like, oh, it's like Lin Manuel Miranda cameo, and it's not. And I was like, oh, okay. But they're talking with her, and it's like she's really only there so they can like, as fast as possible, very economic, just like give you, this is their backstory. They knew each other in high school. That's when they first met. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then like their friend is like, you guys are slackers. You guys need to apply yourselves. You know, like 5 different languages. You're the best driver right now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, then it's like they're just like quick, bam, bam, bam. What are the things we need to know about these characters? And then he picks up he goes to Katie's house or Katie's apartment, and he gets to meet her family, and then we get this like very specific information, like all we need to know. Then they get out, and then they're on the bus, and then there's a big action scene, and it's like every line of dialogue that Katie has in those first 20 minutes is, my mom's disappointed in me. She thinks I'm a slacker. Like I'm good at driving. Also, my mom is disappointed in me. You see that girl over there? That's the kid my mom wishes I was. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's all of it is like just based on that. And then once the plot kicks in, all of her dialogue is like kind of plot oriented. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know, like the movie just feels very economic. And that's not necessarily a problem, but I kind of wish it was allowed itself to, I don't know, maybe before they get to maybe when you get to the Fight Club, maybe that's 30 minutes into it. Maybe that 10 minutes where we're really getting 5 to 10 minutes where we're really getting to know Sean for the first time. What if that was just like 5 minutes longer? Kind of just broadly speaking, not like you make one scene 5 minutes longer, but just like give those scenes more time to breathe. Maybe fill them with a little bit more character details that are not like ultra specific and like incredibly important, but get a little fat on the steak. You know what I mean? Like give it a little
Hmm.
bit more juice.
Um, yes, you know me, I am very much about like efficiency in storytelling. Like, does this 10-minute scene need to be 10 minutes long? Can it be shortened down? That's what I'm all about. But if you are into it, you're not going to notice how long it's running if you're into it. And I agree, I would have liked to have spent more time with these characters than what we got.
I would agree, and I think you're right because like if you're into it, then you don't mind. And I guess it's an interesting way of putting it. Like I guess if I wanted some more, I'm not necessarily into it, but I'm liking it enough, where I kind of do want a little bit more.
Yeah. Um, did you have any more else to say about that?
I did not know. Sorry, that was just kind
Okay.
of a broad
No, that was
observation.
I agree. I had just a couple of very minor notes. Number one, because I am an idiot, I did not realize that the dad was immortal. They show like the little prologue at the beginning where it's like the Mandarin. Some say that he found the rings in a crater, and then like he has like long hair, and I thought I. I either missed some dialogue or I was just supposed to pick up on something visually and I didn't. But like I was under the impression that the rings got passed down from father to son because at one point he tells Shang-Chi, you won't be able to wear the rings until you're worthy to wear them. And so I thought, okay, so this is like the Mandarin's great grandfather or something who's fighting like people who dress like Napoleon. And then at Tao Lo, so we're talking like an hour into the movie, he says to an older man, he says, "You watch your tongue, young man. I've lived 10 of your lifetimes." And I was like, "Wait, what?" I It's very possible that I was just completely missed a very, very like obvious line of dialogue or something, or maybe the movie just showing the same actor but with long hair. I was supposed to pick up on it, but for whatever reason, I just wasn't picking up on that. So I didn't realize that he was immortal. So and now that I think about it, like because he said I found someone who I could grow old with, talking about their mom. I probably should have picked up on it a little earlier, but I didn't. Also, I did say I had some questions about Bruce Banner. So in game, I was under the impression that he and the Hulk had merged, and the whole point of the Professor Hulk is that you take the best aspects of Bruce and the Hulk, and now you have one synthesized being. But in the post-credit scene, you've got Wong, Captain Marvel, and Bruce are basically there to say something weird is going on with these rings. We don't know what it is. It's not really magic. It's not alien, maybe. It's not vibranium. So it's something, and we don't know what it is. And it's Bruce Banner as Mark Ruffalo. And I have a feeling the reason they did that is because it's like Bruce and Captain Marvel are holograms. And if he was Hulk, he'd be like 7.5 feet tall, and he wouldn't be able to fit in the frame. Like the way the shot is, it's pretty close up on Carol and Bruce. And if he was Hulk, they'd have to pull the camera back, and maybe they just didn't want to do that. But that seems really weird. And like his arm is in a cast, and so this movie remembers the events of Endgame because Hulk lost the use of his arm after he snapped everyone back from the events of Infinity War. But then why is he Bruce Banner other than like a filmmaking technical thing?
Yeah, I have no idea.
Okay, and that could be
It's like,
something.
yeah, it
Oh,
was
go
something
ahead.
I noticed too. Like, I don't get it.
And it could be like when you watch is it Ant-Man where we get a air quotes post credit scene where Steve and Sam are talking about the Accords, and we have no idea what that is in Ant-Man, but we find out what it is in the Civil War movie. It could be
Maybe.
that we're going to get an explanation for why Bruce is back to being Bruce in a later movie, but right now it's not really concerned with explaining that. I don't know. I would have been okay with Professor Hulk being a thing for a little while, but maybe they realize, hey, it's cheaper to just have Mark Ruffalo instead of CGIing a Hulk in there. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. That was something I thought was odd too. Maybe we'll get a whole explanation about it. Um, yeah, I don't know. Maybe they just didn't want to spend money. um, but so
Sorry, I just sent Connor a stupid little picture, and so he's giggling.
and now you can look at it right now. Ha
Yes,
ha ha! Take that. So, but I had a question.
yeah.
This is, I guess, this is a good time to ask it because, in that scene at the end, that's when they're like kind of like examining the rings. And the first time I watched this, I assumed it was a setup for Eternals. Um, I watched Eternals. It wasn't a setup for Eternals. So, because there's like, oh wow, it looks like these rings are sentient or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, he's like, wow, these are really really old rings. Ooh, there's some history here. So, how do the rings operate the way they do? Because we don't know exactly how. This is kind of part of the legend, I guess. But like, Wenwu found the 10 rings, and now they kind of belong to him, and he has
Mm-hmm.
like control over them. He can do these like kind of crazy things with them. He can like throw them. He can blow stuff up with them, and they're not like the comic book Ten Rings where each individual one kind of does these, has its own power. I'm pretty sure that's probably to avoid comparisons to the Infinity Stones. Um, but they're just like 10 bracelets. He has 5 on one arm, and he fights with them. He can shoot force with it, and they give him power and long life, I guess. And then he meets uh his wife, who becomes the mom of Shang-Chi and the sister. And then like they sort of start obeying the mom at one point. Why does that happen? And I guess the reason she gives that because Ta Lo, there's a big dragon we call our great protector, and our because we have strong hearts and are given power and immortal life by a dragon. um that's why I was able to take the ring from him. And then I guess they both put away their immortality to raise a family, but then he brings them back out. And so I guess I'm just kind of confused. And then like at the end, it seems like Shang-Chi is able to like take control over some of the rings himself because genetically he's his father's son. So like I don't know. Like I feel like maybe that should be a little bit more clear of like how do these things work? Because if it's one of those things where Wenwu is starting to like you know admire this woman, and like he kind of wants to give himself to her, like that's maybe visually represented in like the rings are kind of now belonging to her as well. But it's really vague and not really defined. And then it's also implied that they're sentient, and I don't know what these rings will is. And the more I've been thinking about it, the more confused I get.
I'll be honest, I didn't really put a whole lot of thought into it. You're right. Like if I started to think about it, it would stop making sense. Like, if these rings are like older than any living being, then what do they want to do? Like, do they want to be used to start a crime organization, or do they want to be used to like fight crime and be heroic? Like, or do they just kind of bend their will to whoever is stronger? Like, there's a whole lot of questions, and I don't have the answers to them. And I will be honest, I would say the movie probably doesn't have the answers to them either.
Yep. I I guess they kind of allude to it. Maybe that'll all be in a sequel. Here are other things that I'm curious about a sequel for. The rings are bracelets. If they call them the 10 rings, I mean, rings are just circles, so, whatever. But, we haven't met Fin Fang Foom, and, but we do have, Fin Fang Foom is not in this movie, but we do got dragons. What if they are meant to fit on the claw fingers of a dragon?
Oh,
There's an idea. And what if they don't have their own individual powers now, but what if in a sequel they realize they can unlock certain powers potentially? I don't know if they'll do that. I feel like that would kind of. I'm looking kind of at the Shang-Chi mythos, and maybe seeing if we can like get more out of it moving forward.
yeah. I I know he's not part of the Shang-Chi mythos, but I this is a fool's errand, a fool's dream, but I'd really love to see him meet Iron Fist. I know that Iron Fist was the worst part of the Marvel Netflix stuff, but I'd love just a quick little like these two fight for like 10 seconds, and then it's like they both say, "You're pretty good." Like, who did you train under? Oh, Lei Kung the Thunderer. My dad told me legends about Lei Kung. Wow. And then they're buddies. I would love to see that. It's never going to happen. But that's my I'd love to see these two just like kicking back a couple old cold ones and having a good time.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Um, that's I think that's about all I have to say. Normally I would ask you what you think they're gonna do with Shang-Chi 2, but I would even ask that if we were talking about like Black Widow. But no, I'm just kidding. But I I don't know anything about the Shang-Chi comics, so I really have no idea what they're going to do. And they may even just take stuff that has nothing to do with Shang-Chi and add it into the movie. Kind of like, I don't know, like the Arrow TV show wasn't really using Green Arrow villains. They were using like everything else from the DC universe. So they may do something like that with Shang-Chi.
Maybe. I mean, I'm interested in a sequel. I guess. Hopefully, it's a little less uh
Magic.
yeah, a little less fantastical, a little less sloppy in the plotting in terms of how it transitions from the more grounded stuff to the fantasy stuff. And hopefully there's not like a mystical creature that's communicating through gerbil noises to a drunken actor who's helping somebody through a maze. That's just weird to me.
Mhm.
I will say though, like the big Dweller in Darkness dragon thing, like by that point my eyes were kind of glazing over. But I don't know, I'm kind of two minds about that because it's like on the one hand, that's a cool looking dragon. Like it looks awesome, and visually speaking, it looks great. Like the CGI on that thing looks excellent. And but like it feels like it's not too little too late. It's like too much too late. Like um we got a soul eating monster coming at the end here, and like I don't know. That seems like kind of a pretty big threat to just kind of take care of in 10 minutes. Um and to be perfectly honest, when Wenwu died, like I didn't think he was actually dead. I thought like, okay, they sucked his soul out, and by the end of the movie he'll be alive again. And then he wasn't, and I was like, oh, well, I guess he'll be back for a sequel. I don't know. That didn't feel like a definitive death to me. Maybe because it's happening in the middle of a bunch of other stuff happening. But I do think the Dweller in Darkness looks awesome. Like if I was a little kid, I would either be scared to death of this thing or think it was the coolest thing in the world. Both responses, I think, are pretty high praise for a monster. But like I said, I think it is a little too much too late.
Yeah.
I felt the need to bring that up because in our last podcast we talked for like an hour and a half, and never once did we talk about Taskmaster. So
Well, here's the thing. Your brother brought that up, and I will go ahead and say this. Taskmaster is not a character in that movie. Taskmaster is a robot. Taskmaster has no lines of dialogue. Taskmaster is effectively like a toaster oven that toasts your bread. Like, it does exactly what it is meant to do. Taskmaster works for Mac from Indiana Jones and does exactly what it is meant to do. There's nothing interesting or engaging about that, and I cannot put enough air quotes around this character in that movie. So it is true. We forgot to talk about Taskmaster. I think we spent more time talking about the motorcycle that Black Widow drives in that movie. And Black Mark Ruffalo. And by the way, I hope everyone got a good look at that. I still think that guy looks like Mark Ruffalo. Anyway,
Black Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't mean to incriminate us for the Taskmaster thing. I thought it was a very funny observation from my brother.
Yes.
But he's right. There's really nothing to say about it. So
so this is a new release podcast. I can't think of any other new releases that are coming out very soon that I'm interested in watching. Eventually, The Eternals will be put on Disney Plus. I'll watch that. Hawkeye will be probably by the time this podcast goes up, it'll almost be done. I'm probably not going to watch Matrix 4. What else is coming out? Like I skipped Venom, Let There Be Carnage.
Thank God, I'm never gonna watch that again.
Maybe there's a Twin Peaks connection there. I'm gonna.
Oh, I please hope there's not. If we ever do a podcast on Venom, the one with Carnage, I will not rewatch it, but I will still talk about it with you.
Okay.
But I will not rewatch that. I hate these stupid Venom movies. I don't know. Are you not going to run out with bated breath to watch Spider-Man, the one with the no harm?
No. I think I mentioned this when we talked about Loki. I'm not interested in the multiverse. I am still disappointed that Tom Holland has not gotten his own movie where he just gets to be Spider-Man. In Homecoming, he is like crying about how he wants Tony Stark's attention. In Far From Home, he's crying because Tony Stark is dead. And then in this next one, Doctor Strange is going to be his mentor, and possibly Andrew Garfield and or Tobey Maguire. And I just don't care. I just want to see Spider-Man doing Spider-Manly things. This kid is like about to go into college. I want to see him like man up and stop like saying like, I don't know, Falcon, Hawkeye, Bucky, I need you guys to come and be in my movie for me. Like I just don't and everyone will be quick to point out, oh, but Spider-Verse was like the best Spider-Man movie ever, and it was a multiverse thing. Yes, but Miles Morales was a character in that movie, and he became Spider-Man, and he earned his Spider-Manliness, and I still don't quite feel like Tom Holland has. Like you and I talked about, like in Far From Home, how he says, I'm going to be Spider-Man. I don't need Mr. Stark. Let's play some AC/DC because I'm just like Mr. Stark. And so I don't know, like everything I've seen about, as soon as I heard it was going to be multiverse, I lost all interest in this movie.
But this time he'll meet other Spider-Mans that he wishes he could be like. So that'll make him want to be more like Spider-Man than Iron Man.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Spider-Man No Way Home looks dumb. I'm not excited for that thing at all, but I'll be there. After watching Ghostbusters Afterlife, I think I've declared war on Sony.
I think I've declared war on cinema. I think I told you this. The last time I was moderately excited for a movie was The Green Knight. I didn't care for it. You liked it more than I did. The last time before that was probably Endgame, and after that, it's like, okay, good. Like, as Pontius Pilate washed his hands at the death of Christ, I am now, I turn my back on ye movies. I watch these things, and it's like, okay, that did the function that it was designed to do, and now, like, I move on. Like, I hate it. I miss the days when I was excited for movies. I remember building up excitement for X2 for like months before I went to go see that movie. And like nowadays, I don't know, everything just feels like a product. It doesn't feel like a story that I'm engaged in. You know what I'm saying? Like, even like this is better than a lot of the other stuff in whatever phase we're in, but I still don't feel like I'm really excited while watching it. Like, I liked it more than a lot of the other stuff.
You don't feel like you missed out not seeing it in like the theaters or anything?
Right. And like I said, I hate that. I wish I could go back to hearing that a movie is going to come out and be like, oh, that sounds cool. That sounds interesting. But these days, like, I don't feel it anymore. I don't know what changed.
Well, yeah.
Oh, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say, like, I mean, with Sony, I really hope No Way Home is good, but you know, they might have 3 strikes in the last 3 months with Venom, Ghostbusters, and Spider-Man. But you know what? We got Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and I hope the Beatles show up in that one. And, you know, nothing's gonna change our worlds. I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah. So we'll be back. I guess the next new release thing, we will be talking about the Hawkeye show, and then who knows after that. I just saw a graphic showing like 200 things coming out in 2022. I'm tired. I'm like Kang from, or I'm sorry, the one at the end, or the one at the end of the universe, whatever they called him in Loki. I'm tired, brother. So yeah. That's all I've got. Well, we will be back in the future. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day.